A lot of us spend our time doom scrolling, specifically on apps like Instagram Reels and TikTok. However, beneath the surface level content, there's a much darker type of content that you wouldn't even believe exists, let alone influence people. And I know that can sound cliche, but by the end of this video, once we're done talking about the TikTok cults, I'm sure you're gonna agree with me. But before we understand what makes all of this possible, we need to talk about TikTok's algorithm. Because here's the thing, what we're about to cover isn't just random bad luck or isolated incidents. It's actually the result of how this platform, which millions of us use every single day, is designed to work. And what better way to look into the algorithm than real-world examples? First is when back in 2021, researchers from Media Matters wanted to try something in the way of testing the algorithm. So they created a fake TikTok account and only interacted with transphobic content. Just that one type of content. And can you guess what happened? Well, within just a little over 2 hours of watching the videos, the algorithm started feeding the account white supremacist content, anti-Semitic videos, and actual calls for violence. And of the 400 videos they analyzed, 103 contained anti-trans content, 42 were misogynistic, 29 had racist messaging, and 14 endorsed violence. Like, a user could download TikTok at breakfast and be watching neo-Nazi content before lunch. Just think about that. Especially in the context of TikTok having over 100 million daily users in the US alone. And more than a third of its daily users being 14 years old or younger. Kids who are getting algorithmically fed extremist content just because they probably clicked on one wrong video. I know this doesn't sound cult related yet, but just stick around and you'll see. Anyway, back to the real world example. It's not just transphobia leading to white supremacy or such kind of stuff. This UCL study from 2024 found that TikTok's algorithm showed a 4-fold increase in misogynistic content in just 5 days. Again, they knew this by creating fake accounts representing vulnerable teenage boys, kids dealing with loneliness or looking for self-improvement content, etc., and began watching. The algorithm started them off with harmless content about masculinity and working out, but within 5 days, the feed was 56% misogynistic content promoting the objectification, harassment of women, and generally degenerate kind of content. But out of that whole study, the part that really puts everything into perspective here is what Dr. Caitlin Redger said, and I quote, "Algorithmic processes on TikTok target people's vulnerabilities like loneliness or feeling out of control and turn harmful content into a kind of game. So when young people are constantly exposed to things like self-harm or extremism, it just feels like entertainment to them." And entertainment is another key word here. These algorithms don't just find vulnerable people, they make extremism feel fun and addictive. So like I was talking about before, what the frick does this have to do with cults? Well, kind of everything. Because the same algorithmic systems that can radicalize someone into far-right ideology in a matter of hours are also perfect for cult recruitment. One of such incidents happened in Missouri back in 2023. 6 people went missing, including 2 3-year-old children, after they got sucked into what investigators called a spiritual cult on social media. The group was called the University of Cosmic Intelligence, and it was apparently run by a convicted child named Rashad Jamal, who had built up hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. I actually talked about this case in the One Cult from Every State video, so if you want to watch that, it's on my channel. Anyway, that Jamal case is pretty wild and should have worried us because his members weren't fringe weirdos living in compounds, they were your regular people. Michaela Wickerson was a 25-year-old mom, Michaela Thompson, age 24, Naaman Williams, age 29. They had jobs, families, normal lives. But through social media, Jamal convinced them that Black and Latino people were gods and goddesses while other races weren't even from this planet, and it all went downhill from there. The missing people became increasingly isolated, quit their jobs, and were seen doing nude meditations outdoors before they vanished completely. I mean, they were eventually found in what turned into a messy situation, but you get the point. The role of the algorithm here is that the more you flood people with fear, confusion, and uncertainty, the easier it is to influence them, especially with strong controlling messages. And honestly, that's what social media does best. It runs on algorithms that thrive on doubt and anxiety because that keeps the people hooked. If I started off this video saying, guys, if you don't watch this all the way through, there's a chance you might die, and then I get into the topic, right? Hey, I could probably get some good watch time, I'm not gonna lie. But imagine that on short form content and someone that's like new to the internet. Bro, they're gonna think they're actually gonna die if they don't watch the video all the way through. Before the internet, cult recruitment happened through personal contacts, alternative bookstores, maybe a radio show. But now you don't even have to put on pants to get lured in. It's as easy as hopping on a stupid trend and boom, you're plugged into a whole network of like-minded people. Or at least that's what you think. And like Jamal's people, you might end up following what looks like a popular ideology, with the many followers they already have on TikTok, for example, being a form of social proof. Actually, nobody knows if these follower counts are even real. It might as well be some bad actors, bots, whether that's foreign governments or domestic extremist groups, artificially boosting these cult leaders' reach through algorithm manipulation. We already saw how TikTok could be a Wild West from that TikTok shop video I made a while back. Anyway, that algorithm is exactly what's giving cult recruiters that power. And TikTok especially is particularly dangerous on matters of cult formation. The platform's unique combination of audio, video, and text makes it incredibly easy to evade community guidelines. Those Media Matters researchers I mentioned earlier, for example, also found extremist videos using something called a memetic format, which just means the content is packaged in a way that's easily shared, copied, and spread, like a meme. Interestingly, with just a popular sound called Teddy that quotes the first line of Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, they found over 1,200 videos, often paired with montages targeting LGBTQ users for harassment. Anyway, that's enough context for the algorithm and how it affects cults. Now we can get into specific cults on TikTok. They're more like a pattern where the algorithms identified vulnerable people, fed them increasingly extreme content, and delivered them straight into the hands of manipulative leaders who knew exactly how to exploit their psychological vulnerabilities. The 7M TikTok cult. So let's start with probably the most well-documented case we've seen so far. This is a story of 7M Films. If you want to understand how modern cult manipulation works, this case is basically a masterclass in everything you need to know. It all started in February of 2022 with this 40-minute Instagram live. That woman in the middle is Melanie Waning, a TikTok dancer, and those are her parents. Here they claimed they had lost all contact with her 25-year-old sister Miranda to what they called a religious organization, and that she was no longer in control of her life. But who is Miranda? Well, she is Miranda. And as you can clearly see, she wasn't some missing person hiding in a compound somewhere. She was still very much in the public eye. In fact, she had just appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show days before her family's plea. That photo is from when she walked the red carpet at the American Music Awards. To her millions of followers, Miranda Derrick, now married to fellow dancer James B. Derrick, looks like she was living her best life, posting polished dance videos and hitting major career milestones. But that's exactly how modern cult manipulation works. It doesn't really look like what you'd expect. Miranda and Melanie had actually performed together as the Wilking sisters, building a massive following on TikTok and YouTube. They were inseparable until Miranda joined something called 7M Films in late 2019. And this is where the story gets really twisted, because even though they tried to present as one, 7M wasn't just a talent management company, it was more of a thin line between control and management. The whole thing was run by Robert Shin, a pastor who also founded Shekinah Church. Shin had this brilliant, manipulative setup. He'd find successful TikTok dancers on social media and offer them something every creator dreams of: professional management, brand deals, appearances on major shows. Through 7M, he got dancers opportunities like commercials, bookings on The Ellen Show, and dancing at LA Clippers games. It looked legitimate. But what was never apparent to those kids, and which is kind of a reality of cult manipulation, it always starts with something you want. I mean, if we look at Shin's background, what you find is the calculated nature of his approach. His LA-based Shekinah Church started small, maybe 15 people including his family. Over the years, he opened several businesses: a cafe, 2 mortgage companies, 2 real estate companies, 2 flower shops, all that topped with the red flag of how exploitation works in modern cults. Employees of these businesses were all church members and paid very little. One former member, Melanie Lee, said she was paid just $100 a week working 12-hour shifts. When Shin's attempt at being a Hollywood executive producer failed, he shifted to social media talent management. He saw these young dancers as a new revenue stream. And honestly, that's exactly what they became. But to pull that off, he had to start with step 1 from the Cult Playbook: manipulation. Shin told his followers they needed to die to themselves and their family. He convinced these young people that cutting off their loved ones was actually an act of love, that they needed to die to their family in order to save them for the afterlife. Miranda Wilking experienced this firsthand. Melanie explains in the documentary that her sister was inseparable from the family until she joined 7M. She immediately turned all that off, getting married without telling her parents, and she tried recruiting her sister, but when Melanie attended the dinners hosted by Shin, she sensed red flags and declined to go to his invite-only church services. But Miranda was already too deep in, and part of the exploitation sprinkled with some worship. Former members reported that Shin bragged about his famous clients during his ceremonies. He was literally using their success to validate his authority and attract more followers. Meanwhile, the dancers were seeking his approval by proving they would do whatever it took to get his attention. Then comes the financial control. Just like with his church businesses, Shin was profiting off his dancers while they did the work. And not the usual considerate profit where employees are paid fairly. No. Former members actually accused him of not only that financial abuse, but also sexual and emotional abuse, though he has been denied these allegations and no criminal charges have been filed. But what we do know for sure is that Shin perfected the system of control over time. Just take a look at his track record. Long before he discovered TikTok dancers, he was already practicing these techniques. For example, two sisters Melanie and Priscilla Lee joined his Shekinah church back in 1999 as young Korean immigrants. They became completely dependent on the church for housing and work, both isolated from their family and exploited for cheap labor. And while Melanie eventually managed to escape with the help of a friend, Priscilla stayed behind, and the sisters still lost contact for years, which shows you exactly how the isolation piece of cult manipulation works. It makes members so dependent on the group that leaving seems just impossible, and even when some leave, others don't seem to be fazed by that idea. So basically, we can sum this case up as Shin just adapting traditional cult tactics to the social media age. Picture him just scrolling through TikTok, identifying successful young creators, and offering them exactly what the algorithm had taught them to want: more fame, more followers, and more success. And maybe to show you just how deep these individuals had gotten, even after federal agents raided a property linked to Shin in July of 2025, related to investigations into sex trafficking and money laundering allegations, the dancers who remained with 7M were still posting content, still defending the organization. Anyway, Miranda Derrick is now back in contact with her family, but the documentary alleges this is mostly for optics and that she remains close to Shin. And by the way, if this can happen in Los Angeles with successful social media influencers, I mean, it's proof that this can happen to literally anyone. Children of the Waning Star. Now, if you're even remotely curious as to how quick a cult can form on TikTok, then you're going to want to listen to this one. It actually just happened last month, and it's probably one of the most disturbing examples of how quickly things can spiral out of control when you combine vulnerable young people, social media algorithms, and someone who knows exactly what they're doing. On July 11th of 2025, this TikTok user named Gigi Jarvis posted what seemed like a completely harmless video. She titled it, "Starting a Cult Day 1, and told her followers, "I'm starting a cult and want you all to be a part of it." To be fair, the whole thing seemed a little satirical, like a joke. Gigi appeared to just be messing around, creating lighthearted content for entertainment, although we already know what quote entertainment does to our algorithms. Anyway, in that very first video, Gigi wasted no time laying down the groundwork for control. She introduced something called Victim of the Week. Basically, followers would drop funny pictures in the comments to get her attention, and the winner got their profile picture stolen by Gigi for a whole week. Then she took it a step further, asking her followers to help build the rules for their quote little society, suggesting they come up with holidays and even pick special emojis to recognize each other. And that was honestly like a little nudge needed to push things even further. Within minutes of starting a cult, she was all the way in, consumed by the whole thing, and even asking followers to help create the belief system, the symbols, the rituals, kind of like she was crowdsourcing the manipulation. And it worked. Fast. The community named themselves the Children of the Waning Star. They developed their own symbols, a star and a purple fingerprint emoji. By day 5, Gigi announced they had nearly 150,000 people, and she wasn't exaggerating when she admitted that just 6 days earlier, she had been a nobody. And to be fair, a lot of people will probably follow someone online just because they're funny, weird, or chaotic enough to make them wonder what the hell is going on here. Sometimes it's less about agreeing with them and more about watching the train wreck unfold. But if you know anything about how cult recruitment works, which you do by now, then you know whether intended or not, what she was doing was part of the playbook. And it turned out Gigi wasn't just some random person messing around on social media. This Reddit user found out she actually has a degree in sociology and took several cult-focused courses during college. We're talking classes on deviance, social control, even criminal profiling. And she didn't just pass, she made the dean's list and was in the National Honor Society. She thrived in that stuff. So when former cult victims started speaking out about the dangers of her rhetoric, warning that these things have a habit of getting out of control, they had good reason to be concerned because, again, it seemed like Gigi knew exactly what she was doing with each step she made. And true to that, this harmless fun shifted to cult-like devotion fast, like really fast. In this video, Gigi was already laying down the apocalyptic storyline that would shape the whole group. She said a bunch of followers were claiming they'd been visited by some kind of mysterious entity, and then everyone asked everyone to help figure out what it was. Was it the Waning Star itself? Some kind of mythical guardian? She told them that whoever came up with the most popular theory would get a shout out in the next day's meeting. This was part of creating a shared mythology that makes members feel special and chosen, and she was doing it through TikTok comments and engagement metrics. Then she posted another video, this time making a clarification. Here she mentioned that her dog had just died, she'd had her birthday, and she was feeling crazy. She talked about creating an inclusive community that thrives off kindness for people who don't feel like they fit in. She specifically mentioned attracting neurotypical people and those who maybe don't feel like they belong anywhere else. In other words, this is arguably just the playbook again unfolding, where cult leaders find vulnerabilities they could just exploit. Grief, loneliness, feeling like an outsider, and Gigi was just openly acknowledging that this was her target demographic. However, it didn't take long for reasonable people to catch on and start calling out how dangerous this was getting. But even then, Gigi pushed back with the whole cult label, all while keeping every control structure firmly in place. She insisted she wasn't a cult leader, that her concept was about enlightenment, not control, which sounds just like what a cult leader would say. But at the same time she was saying all of that, she was also making it super clear who was in charge. Her, obviously. She set up this so-called voting system where followers could give their input, but in the end, she made all the big decisions. And if you wanted more info on how to actually join, you had to pay $5.99 a month just to message her on TikTok. Because of course, the cult leaders gotta get paid. Meanwhile, as the group kept growing, the apocalyptic vibes got even stronger. Gigi started encouraging members to come up with offerings for these mysterious entities, and she was basically building an entire mythology around supernatural contact and spiritual experiences, but only for her followers. And then things got really dark, as thousands of people started putting the purple fingerprint and star emojis in their bios, referring to Gigi as leader, and conducting summoning rituals for the Waning star entity. Reports started coming in about According to this report, people were, quote, sacrificing animals, carving symbols into their bodies, and participating in increasingly violent and harmful behavior. On Discord servers dedicated to the community, thousands of people were exchanging beliefs about what should be included in the group's, quote, lore. Interestingly, the speed at which this escalated shows you exactly how TikTok's algorithm can amplify dangerous content. Gigi's first video got 2.2 million views and counting. The algorithm identified that engagement, controversy, and emotional responses were high, so it pushed the content to more and more people. Within days, vulnerable users who had never heard of Gigi, amongst other kinds of users, were being fed her content and recruited into a group that was rapidly developing all the hallmarks of a dangerous cult. Anyway, when the backlash reached a critical point, Gigi posted a lengthy apology, and I'm quoting this part: "I started what was meant to be a fun, creative community. I genuinely didn't realize how hurtful the word cult could be to some. I never supported any harmful behavior." FYI, since I started working on this video, Gigi hasn't posted anything new on her TikTok, but all the videos are still up, and judging by the comments, the whole thing is still very much alive. The followers don't seem to care that their, quote, leader tried to shut it down. At this point, the cult has taken on a life of its own, and it only took less than 2 weeks that Gigi's first joke video led to reports of self-harm and animal sacrifices. Just 14 days. That's alleged, that's according to the report. I want to make that clear. Let's move on to the next one. The Cult Playbook. So this isn't a cult that's on the list. Rather, we're going to talk about the Cult Playbook. So if you've been paying attention to what we just covered, Robert Shin's 7M operation and Gigi's rapid fire cult creation, you've probably noticed some patterns, most of which I've explicitly pointed out. Those patterns are not a coincidence. These people are literally working from the same playbook whether they realize it or not. And bear with me if I seem a little repetitive, but I want to tie it all together first before we get into a few more Wild West kinds of stories. See, cult manipulation follows rather predictable steps. And once you know what to look for, you'll notice the red flags everywhere. So, red flag number 1, the charismatic leader who promises everything you want. Both Shin and Gigi started by offering people exactly what they were looking for. Shin targeted successful TikTok dancers and offered them more fame, more opportunities, more success, basically everything the algorithm had already trained them to crave. She, on her end, targeted people who felt like outsiders and promised them a community where they'd finally belong. Why? Because the cult leaders are master salespeople. They figure out what people are missing in their lives, connection, purpose, validation, and then sell themselves as the answer. Red flag number 2, love bombing followed by isolation. You might recognize this from a toxic relationship, or maybe not if you've been lucky, but love bombing is when someone showers you with attention, affection, and praise, and then suddenly goes cold. Gigi jumped right into building that secret little insider community with special emojis, rituals, and roles. Shin did the same thing in his way. He got his dancers on red carpets and TV shows, made them feel like they were part of something big and glamorous. Then, once you're hooked on that feeling of being special, that's when the isolation starts. This is the more obvious. Shin literally told his followers to die to their families. Red flag number 3. You have to prove your dedication. Whether it's through actions or money, the specifics don't really matter. What matters is that it creates a bond of control, a message that says, you do what I say or you're not a part of this anymore. And red flag number 4, the leader is always right. Even when they're wrong, even when it's all supposedly over, it's hard for the followers to let go. They're all hooked. That's because by that point, questioning the leader or even accepting that the leader made a mistake would mean admitting they've been manipulated. And that's exactly the ultimate goal of cult manipulation. Creating such complete psychological control that people will defend their abuser even when presented with clear evidence of abuse. Anyway, now that you know the Cult Playbook, these next 3 stories will sound very familiar. The Daddy's Girls Cult. She right here is Angela Van Dusen, known on TikTok as Angela the Goddess, and what became known as the Daddy's Girls Cult. Angela was a 27-year-old home healthcare aide who had built a following of about 50,000 people by posting thirst trap videos on TikTok. Her content apparently followed a specific template. She turned her steely blue gaze on the camera, usually while biting her lower lip and lip-syncing provocative lyrics, or simulating strap-on sex while winking. I can't believe I just said that on the main channel. It sounds like something I'd say on my streams, but here we are on the main channel with me saying that. But yeah, basically thirst traps. She'd also documented her dramatic weight loss journey and frequently made videos about her love of BBWs, big beautiful women. And right about there is where the manipulation started. While creating that harmless content, Angela was identifying and targeting that very specific demographic. She frequently made videos about her love for bigger women, combined with content about her own weight loss experience. And for women who felt marginalized by society's beauty standards, this felt revolutionary. Che, for instance, a single stay-at-home mom of 2 from Michigan, was instantly smitten when Angela appeared on her For You page. As she later explained, it wasn't just Angela's looks that attracted her, it was the fact that Angela understood what bigger people go through, the insecurities and the struggles that come with not fitting in society's standards. They both exchanged numbers. Che was thrilled. They started chatting every day, sometimes late into the night while Angela worked her healthcare shifts. And when Angela mentioned she was involved in the kink lifestyle and wanted Che to be her submissive, Che didn't hesitate. She'd never explored BDSM before, but the prospect intrigued her. Same with the fact that Angela had multiple online admirers. Che was interested in polyamory too. Then, in winter of 2021, something shifted. Another one of Angela's followers started calling her daddy during one of her Saturday Night Lives. Angela loved it. She requested that all of her followers call her daddy and call themselves Daddy's Girls. Yup, another sentence I didn't think I'd say here, but here we are. What started as a sisterhood quickly evolved into something much more controlling. Now, just to give expert context on the manipulation that was at work here, in this sort of marginalized community, jet-setting Jasmine, a licensed clinical therapist and master fetish trainer, didn't know fetish trainer was even a thing, okay. She explained the vulnerability this way. Black women often don't have the same access to BDSM education and training because they're unwelcome in traditional kink spaces due to stigma around black sexuality. So when someone like Angela appears, a woman of color offering what looks like a safe outlet to explore BDSM, it seems like salvation. But that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. These are women who are already marginalized by both mainstream society and the BDSM community, making them perfect targets for predators. The Daddy's Girls identified themselves with yellow hearts in their bios, inspired by Angela painting her nails yellow once and liking the color. They gathered every Saturday night for Angela's lives, which initially were marketed as support groups for BBWs, charging $50 via Cash App for Zoom attendance. But the blurred lines between lifestyle and coercion became apparent quickly. Former member Jasmine noticed that within a week of joining, she was told she couldn't go live on her own account without permission. When she asked why, other Daddy's Girls told her she had to ask first or else they'd all get in trouble. That's control right there. Members report being required to attend and comment on all of Angela's lives and videos to boost engagement. They had to stay on the phone with her during her overnight shifts. Their social media content had to be entirely about their allegiance to Angela. And this is where the line between BDSM and straight up abuse just completely disappears. Angela was allegedly telling members to themselves as punishment for small mistakes or anything she saw as disrespect. Che said she once carved the letter A into her leg for not showing enough respect during a live. Another time, on a group FaceTime, members were told to themselves. Che had to do it 7 times because she was crying, which apparently made Angela angry. Screenshots shared with Rolling Stone back it all up. Other members also report being required to pray to Angela every morning and night. One of them even said she would take a bullet for Angela, be stabbed for her, die for her, because she knew Angela was powerful, strong, and God. Che hit her breaking point when she flew to Michigan to meet Angela. In a hotel room, Angela allegedly slapped her and grabbed her face. When Shay got scared and pulled back, Angela tried to cut things off, and it turned into a full-blown fight. After that, the internet started catching on. A petition to deplatform Angela got over 21,000 signatures, but her most loyal followers, the Daddy's Girls, just doubled down. Even after TikTok banned her, they kept posting yellow hearts and defending her like nothing happened. Rebuilding Atlantis, alleged. Now, this case is unfolding as we speak, and nobody knows how it's gonna end. Some people are calling it a cult in the making, and others are just calling it an alternative living experiment. But what everyone agrees on is that TikTok is allowing us to watch whatever unfolds before our eyes. Meet Michael Guzman, better known as Rebuilding Atlantis on TikTok. He apparently owns 20 acres of desert land in West Texas, and since January of 2024, he's been inviting people to live there for free. His pitch is bring whatever you have, a tent, your vehicle, a camper, and escape the oppressive systems that are pricing everyone out of a normal life. He connects with people talking about how rent is too high, groceries are too expensive, and that he just can't take the oppressive system anymore. So he posted a video saying it was time to start a revolution, explaining that he had everything organized and prepared, including chickens for his off-grid community. As expected, his message resonates. It is in fact true that housing costs are crushing people. Young people honestly can barely afford to live by themselves. So when someone offers free land and a chance to build something better, it sounds pretty appealing. Every step of the process was documented, live streamed, and hashtagged. His videos show him hauling water in tanks from the quote ghost town of Sierra Blanca, rigging a washing machine to run by solar power, and attempting to grow a garden in the desert. And that's basically how the recruitment started. Anyone interested had to subscribe to his TikTok and pay $5.99 monthly to support him. Two people eventually took the plunge: Austin Mowry and a woman known as Visionary Empress. They both started their own TikTok accounts documenting their experiences. Visionary Empress posted videos showing her building a shade tent and explaining her work doing quote conscious language upgrades. Austin showed off his tent setup and the landscape around the property. The utopian promises were classic for this kind of venture. Michael positioned Atlantis as a place where people could be self-sufficient, escape government control, and build a better society. He talked about opening a general store to sell items to residents, creating a sustainable community where people didn't need money. Now, the question of whether this constitutes a cult is genuinely complicated, which is why this is listed as alleged. On the surface, Michael says everyone's responsible for their own food, shelter, and movement. It's his land, and yeah, he's clearly in charge, but he's not forcing people to stay or pushing a big belief system. No shared ideology, no you can't talk to your family, but things start to feel off pretty quickly. He got irritated when people hesitated to move to the literal middle of the desert. He's super combative with any kind of criticism or authority that doesn't exactly scream safe leader. Anyway, people did actually start living there. Sarah was one of them. She drove in from Florida to help deliver water and was promised a cut of the profits and a tiny house. Instead, their water truck got stuck for 3 days. She had to walk for hours in the heat, lost her shoes, and found herself surrounded by trash, no power, no sewer, no shade, just chaos. When she spoke up, Michael got verbally abusive. She called 911 after one fight, and he told her she wasn't allowed to ask for help. When she finally left, he refused to give her a ride or let her charge her phone. She walked 8 miles with one bag and a bottle of water before someone called the cops to help her. Visionary Empress also left. Less drama, but still admitted it was too much. Living off-grid was just not what she signed up for. So, is it a cult? Well, that's pretty much up for debate. You guys can leave comments down below. There's a claim of no force ideology or spiritual manipulation, and people are free to leave, which many have, but there are clearly red flags: financial barriers, isolation, verbal abuse, and a growing list of people who came in hopeful and left traumatized. The Garden, alleged. Our final case brings us to what might be the most complex and controversial TikTok community we've examined: the Garden in Lafayette, Tennessee. And like with Rebuilding Atlantis, people are still divided on exactly what this was. Some called it a dangerous cult that needed to be shut down, others insisted it was just a misunderstood intentional community that got destroyed by an internet mob mentality. But what everyone can agree on is this: the Garden became one of the first communities to have its entire rise and fall documented through TikTok. The story begins with Patrick Martian, who founded the Garden as an offshoot of the Rainbow Family movement. Martian grew up in the Rainbow Gathering scene, Those counterculture communities known for their bohemian lifestyle and sometimes controversial reputation, the garden started as Shut Up and Grow It, evolving from the Rainbow's family traveling kitchens with a stated mission to encourage sustainable food production. The 25.5-acre property operated as what they called an egalitarian, alternative, leaderless community, propagating a culture of sharing freedom and cooperation. They governed through council meetings aimed at achieving consensus, and newcomers got a 10-day visitor pass. After those 10 days, if you wanted to stay longer, you had to ask the community for permission. And for a whole 12 years, the garden operated relatively quietly. The number of residents fluctuated, sometimes as high as 100 people, sometimes down to just a handful. In a 2020 YouTube interview, Martian explained that their goal was, quote, to enable and empower as many people as possible, as fast as possible, to no longer need money. He had this vision where people would find the community online and flock to it. Now enter Tree is Alive, a 24-year-old from the UK and his partner Julia. They were traveling across the US, visiting communes and documenting their off-grid adventures on YouTube. In late 2020, they landed at the garden because it seemed perfect for their sustainable living journey. Tree started posting TikToks about it, all pretty wholesome at first, building birdhouses, climate talk, off-grid showers. But in February of 2021, he posted a full tour, dropped the address, and invited people to join. That video blew up. At first, the response was great, but once it hit the mainstream side of TikTok, things got weird. Internet people dug up old criminal records, sketchy YouTube videos, and even a story about residents killing and eating a feral cat. The cat incident actually became a scandal and got a lot of fixation, posts and comments alike, and one resident casually joked online that it, quote, tasted like chicken, which didn't help. And it was at this point that suddenly the garden was being labeled as a cult, and some residents leaned into it, posting dark jokes, holding candlelit rituals, and literally passing around a jug labeled Kool-Aid. You know, the Jonestown reference. The fun was intertwined with a lack of clarity, and with the internet confusion at play, things escalated fast. A TikToker even reported Tree to immigration, and in classic internet fashion, death threats started rolling in. Tree said he felt, quote, dead inside. The garden, which had existed for over a decade, shut its doors to the public. When Tree and Julia finally left, only 4 people were left living there. So, cult or not, once again, I'll leave it up for you to decide. But it absolutely looked like a messy experiment in alternative living that got chewed up by the TikTok outrage machine. All things considered, what we have seen, at least in my opinion, are seemingly different groups with different tactics but the same patterns, which makes me believe TikTok cults aren't random at all. They kind of thrive because the platform rewards what makes them go viral in the first place, unique content that is sometimes edgy and unhinged. Just like we saw with Robert Shin, who used pro dance gigs to pull young creators away from their families, or Gigi Jarvis, who used her cult psychology background to blow up to 150,000 followers in under a week, or Angela Van Dusen, twisting body positivity and BDSM culture to manipulate and profit off vulnerable women. Even the cases where people debate whether they're actually cults show the same pattern. Charismatic leaders offering solutions to real problems, using TikTok to bypass traditional gatekeepers, and attracting followers who are desperate for belonging, purpose, or escape from their current circumstances. The algorithm doesn't care if it's healing or harmful, it just wants your attention. And when someone's lonely or looking for meaning, it's way too easy to confuse control for care. Anyway, I guess if a creator's offering all the answers, demanding loyalty, or telling you to cut loved ones off, maybe ask yourself, is this content or is this a cult? Because on TikTok, sometimes the difference is just one swipe. And with that being said, my name is Tuv. Hopefully I earned your subscription. If you want to see more of my personality, I live stream a lot over on twitch.tv/tuvington_. And with that being said, leave a like on the video. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next time I upload.